Okay. So now I want to pause recording. Okay, here. All right, well, welcome everyone. This is the Pasadena Village 1619, the Lingering Imprint session. And today we have special return guests, Dick Price and Sharon Kyle, coming from the LA Progressive, who I'm sure everybody knows about the LA Progressive. It's a very well-known newsletter here, an award-winning newsletter. And they have a lot of very interesting stuff there. So with that, Sharon and Dick are going to talk to us about how things are going right now for the things we're interested in terms of this election. And there's a lot to talk about here. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys, Dick, Sharon, and Dick. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks for welcoming us, Dick.
Yes,
this won't go well if I can't talk any better.
You can't say welcome. Yeah, thank you for having us. It's nice to join you guys again, and I wish that we could come to you with great news, but sadly we can't. So we'll just share with you what our last 24 hours have been like as we prepared to make this presentation to you. Right, Dick?
Well, hopefully not all of it.
Well, we'll share as much as you're comfortable with. I'm willing to share everything. So Dick and I, usually when we make presentations, we do it using a company with PowerPoint slides. And I'm the person who makes the PowerPoint presentation. I prepare it. So I was preparing the PowerPoint presentation yesterday, and I was searching for something on the LA Progressive, and the LA Progressive is our publication. We publish 5 articles, usually 5 articles every day, and we have done that for the past 17, 18 years. So I was looking for an article on the LA Progressive that I wanted to share with you, and I ran into something else, and it caused Dick and I to have a meltdown. Dick, do you want to, because I don't want to say anything that you don't want me to say. So why don't you share what you'd like to share about our discussion? And it's relevant for this conversation because it really speaks to the gap between the races and how Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and their presidential races are putting that on full display in this country, and how some people are just so surprised that Donald Trump has such a following, and how others are not so surprised because we see this, but we see stuff that a lot of people don't see. And it's all because of the separate ways that we live. Dick, do you want to say anything about our?
Yeah, so what happened in our little operation, I post a lot of the articles. I will post between 5 to 8 articles every day. Sometimes I read them closely. Other times I skim through them and know the author and just let it go. And a year ago, I published an article that was that Sharon interpreted as being racially insensitive or offensive. At the time, a year ago, I didn't really see it that way, but after our conversation, I could see how she's right about that. And so we had a conflagration about posting articles that I mean, so the code word for the LA Progressive is the centrality of race. So a lot of our articles focus on, a lot of our discussion focus on how racism affects virtually every part of American life or life in the world. And so we had a discussion about that article.
Right. And what came out of that discussion for me is that Dick and I still continue to have a long way to go before we're both on the same page about things that are racially unjust. For they don't land on him the same way they land on me. And the article was a sort of a screed on a Black movie producer who was snubbed at the Oscars. And she, in her social media or in the Hollywood Reporter, she talked about how her film was so widely accepted and how happy she was about, she had a screening at UCLA, which she had gone to UCLA. That's where she got her degree in filmmaking, and how wonderful the reception was. And yet, after she left UCLA, she ran over to Westwood to a makeup store to pick up some makeup that she needed for another event. She was fixing up her face and she was going to another event, and she's a Hollywood producer. And when she got into the makeup store, she noticed that the security was following her. And she was upset that she went, just the contrast between going to this film thing and then being followed, how upsetting it was to her. Well, the writer of the article dismissed her being upset by being followed by security and wanted to focus on her privilege. She is a producer. She makes great money. Why should she be so concerned about a security officer following her? And Dick and I really got into sort of a big argument because I'd never seen the article. We publish a lot, and Dick does most of the posting, and I do most of the IT work. And I would have thought that he would have shared this with me before posting it, but he didn't. And so what came out of that for me was that we see through different lenses, and this country sees through different lenses. And I believe that's why we have this great divide that is making itself so clear in this 2024 presidential election. Kamala Harris is, and all of her cohorts and all of her people that speak on her behalf, they're really trying to appeal to a broad section of this country. And the reason they're putting so much effort into that is because this country has been voting along racial lines forever. It has never not done that. So what does that mean for this election? Dick, what does that mean? If Trump wins or if Kamala wins,
Sure.
what will we do?
Sure. So on that article, I mean, part of what it was a very long article by a guy I know, and I didn't read it closely, and I was definitely wrong for not bringing it to Sharon's attention, or probably not publishing it at all. And so mea culpa, I did that wrong. So among the two of us, and probably partly because of racial reasons, I'm always the guy with the glass half full. I'm always, and actually my training, I trained myself to be optimistic. So I tend to look on the bright side of things as best I can. And with this coming election, I mean, my fantasy is somehow Kamala Harris and Tim Walz squeak to a victory. Somehow the Democrats take both Republican or both houses of Congress. And I'm not saying that wonderful things will happen because the country is so divided, but at least we'll be able to tread water and make some progress, and perhaps push a Kamala Tim administration somewhere toward progressive points of view. My more realistic point of view is I fear that Trump he has captured a part of the population, and he's good at manipulating. He's a great Hermann Göring. He's a great at propaganda, and that he will win. And in that case, his first administration was dreadful, but he was somewhat inept, and he was surrounded by some people that would keep him modestly within reasonable guidelines. That won't happen this time. He'll still be inept, but now he has a real right-wing vice president, and he will surround him with people like is it Stephen Smith that Stephen Miller that will absolutely take the country in horrible directions. As I mentioned to Sharon, I recall that, and I had forgotten about it, that Dwight Eisenhower deported 1 million braceros, 1 million Mexican Americans during his administration years ago. I mean, obviously in the 50s. And Stephen Miller has promised to deport 2 million a year. And I think this time they will attempt those things. And what do we think we will do about it? I'm also, you know, in my reading over my life, I mean, I understand Spain under Franco and Argentina under Perón and these fascist regimes that lasted for decades. And I said, well, that would never happen in America. We got the democracy, and I don't know. I mean, there is nearly half of the voting population are batshit crazy. Yeah. And would go for a fascist. And Trump knows, he knows the symbolism. He's not bright, but he's clever like a snake. And yeah. And we would be fighting uphill, and as Sharon will tell you, I'm sure in a moment, the heaviest burden will fall on Black people, next on brown people, next on gay people, next on Mexican Americans, but it'll also hit all of us. So I'm kind of on tenterhooks about what's happening with this election. Your turn.
So, and if anybody wants to jump in, please jump in here, because we're not going to have a PowerPoint presentation, although I'm going to show you in a minute a slide that I created years ago after an argument that Dick and I had, and after my research.
The other argument that we had?
Yeah. Oh. So we don't, you know, we're a typical married couple. In fact, in some ways, I think we're exceptional in that we spend 24/7 almost connected at the hip. We work together, we live together, we sleep together, we pretty much do everything together. We're in our office right now. Our chairs are the same and we sit side by side. So we're always together. But occasionally we do argue, and we've been married and living together for 22 years. And over those years, I've seen a pattern. And most of our arguments, I believe, come about because we see things differently based on our cultural difference and our race difference and our gender difference. It's not that we disagree about how the solutions that we want for this country. What we disagree about is the strategies for achieving them.
So typically what goes on is I've evolved over the 22 years we've been together. I mean, when I came into this marriage, I had Black friends and I had a Black daughter, and intellectually, I understood the effect racism and microaggressions and discrimination has on Black people intellectually, and some of it I saw. But over 22 years living with Sharon and being somewhat embedded in her family and publishing LA Progressive, that intellectualism has come down into more of an emotional connection. Not entirely. Now, Sharon, it was different. Early on, she chose to be Black, and she has lived with discrimination and abuse to the point where, I mean, it's embedded in her, especially with LA Progressive. So so here's an example. If there's a shooting or a police beating of a Black person in Los Angeles, she will be devastated thinking about her son, who teaches school in South LA and will be driving through those neighborhoods. And what if that happened to him or her brother or her many cousins or just another Black person that she knows? And I'm a step behind her. I have to intellectually, oh yeah, that could happen. She knows it in her soul, and it drives her into the ground.
Yes. So let's get back to Kamala and the orange guy. So what's going to happen either way? Dick and I are slightly different in how we plan to change our lives or not change our lives, regardless of who wins. If Kamala wins, I in no way feel that, oh, great, everything's good and I'm safe. In fact, in some ways, if Kamala wins, I am more in danger because there's blowback. There was blowback after Obama. I'll give you a sense of what I mean. You guys remember the O.J. Simpson case. Well, when the verdict was going to be read, that day that we knew that the verdict was coming down, I was on a business trip. I was at a 3-day training at a conference in Las Vegas. I worked at the time for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and I'm assuming you guys all know where that is because you live in Pasadena. And I was at this conference, and there were maybe about 100 of us that were at the conference, and I was the only Black person. And when the announcement was made that the verdict was coming down, everybody knew when the verdict was going to be announced. So they interrupted the conference. The instructor said, would you like to go, and talking to all 100 of us, would you like to go into this other area where we have television screens and we can listen to what the verdict is going to be? So we went into another room and we listened to the verdict, and we all know what the verdict was. And I was sort of standing at the back of the room. And when the verdict came down, almost every single person in that room turned around and looked at me. And I'm telling you, this is a 99 people that are white and me. And I don't know why they looked at me. Well, I do know why, because I'm Black and O.J. Simpson is Black. And so I guess they felt that I would have a different feeling. I don't know. But I will say that when major racial centered issues come down in this country, we all pay a price. And I feel this, I know the same thing happened with Obama. I know how the types of relationships that I had, how they shifted after Obama won. And I expect that if Kamala wins, the same will be true. In fact, the New York Times, during Obama's campaign years, he campaigned, I think, for 1.5 years. The New York Times wrote about an uptick in racial violence. And there was, and they put out a map where they showed, and I don't have that map. They put out a map where they showed all across the nation. So some might assume that this just goes on in the South. It doesn't. It was all across every single state in the nation. There was an uptick in hate crimes, mostly directed toward Black and brown people. And so my sense of urgency of coming up with a plan is driven by being very close to the problem and having my own personal experiences with this problem. So for me, whether Kamala wins or whether Donald Trump wins, I need to take some kind of action to be safe. But what concerns me even more than my fear of what might happen to me is my fear of for my children. So Dick just talked about my son who teaches. He is a teacher, but he's currently running for office. He's running for the Lomita City Council, and he's been door knocking in a community. Lomita is adjacent to Torrance, to Gardena. It's in the South Bay. So it's in Los Angeles County, you know, probably 5 miles from downtown LA. And in his community, in his neighborhood, people feel very comfortable flying the Confederate flag. And this is a neighborhood, and I'm going to share my screen and show you what it looks like at his city hall. Okay, I'm going to do a share screen.
Did you hit it?
Yeah. So can you all see this? This is an article that I wrote in the LA Progressive. I don't know how big it is it. Can you see this, the photograph in the article?
Yes.
All right. So this is a snapshot of a wall in the City Hall of Lomita, where it shows all the leaders since inception. And Lomita has a population that is 37% white. So the population is 37% white, and this is the leadership of the city. And my son would, if he wins this election, we'll see, he will be the first Black man. And I talk about this, I wrote this article, and I call it racial discrimination that is often ignored. When a Black person walks into a room like that and sees that everyone who is in leadership is white, even though only 37% of the population is white, that sends a powerful message. So my concern about what's going to happen to this country is that if Kamala wins, Black and brown people will continue to suffer. White progressives and liberals will feel like, whew, you know, we dodged that bullet. And they'll feel like everything is okay. If Trump wins, we all know that this is a problem that we've got to address. I don't know.
Well, so I hear what she says, and I know that's true. I would say that many people, white people of my ilk, know that the country's in a very dangerous position, no matter which person wins. If Kamala Harris and Tim Walz wins, there is still a sizable chunk of the country, 70 million people who voted for Trump each of the earlier times, and will again. There's armed militias in the mountains. There's people are feeling more and more free to tote guns, and in some sense the cap has been taken off racism. I would say a certain number of us white people have always had a racist bone in our body. But now it's like people have permission to express that racism. So if Kamala Harris wins, I think we will still be in a different. I think progressives know that we'll still be in a different position. I do think it leaves open the possibility for progress eventually. If Trump wins, it's quite the opposite. Then the fascists and the racists will be ascendant. They will be in many parts of the government. The Trump administration they have promised to fire all the existing workers and replace them with their loyalists. I see Sally has a question.
Well, one thing that I am concerned about is that technically Trump isn't really eligible. He's a convicted felon and should not be running. In many places, convicted felons can't vote. So what is he doing running for president? Why is nobody featuring this? It's kind of been swept under the rug, and I don't think Kamala has emphasized it enough. That this is a man who is evil, basically, an antichrist, basically, just so that the fundamentalists will understand that. And there's so much that could be said that isn't being said that I think needs to be.
Yes.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So Sally, my answer is Trump and his cohorts have found ways to beat our legal system. Yes, he's been convicted of things, but he hasn't served a minute in jail. He's been levied fines and hasn't paid $1. He has defeated our media. He has been treated with false equivalency. So Kamala Harris says this, and Donald Trump, who is a nut and a fascist and a convicted criminal, and he's put on the same plane. He has defeated our political system. In a way, I don't think a novelist could write this and sell it to a book publisher.
I'd like to just
Go
pick up on I'd like to pick up on that a little bit. And I want to say, Sharon, I agree with all of your concerns about Kamala victory and the backlash and everything that's going to start up. But I'd like to be a little bit more hopeful in that I think, and this kind of picks up on Dick's point, I think that our experience with Donald Trump has shown us a lot of the defects and deficiencies in our system. Our institutions are just incapable of dealing with this guy in so many ways. And I also think that there is a real mood in the country for making changes and serious changes. I think this could be a real directional change. It could be a turning point. that means it's going to be difficult. That doesn't mean there won't be strife. And I think that all of your points, Sharon, were on point. But I think that there's a sense in the country that we need to do things differently. And when you look at polls on the positions that the Democrats are taking, they'll see in favor somewhere between 70 and 90% of people approve of the positions, the positions that are part of the Democratic program. Now, those are kind of broad generalizations, but generally the mood in the country goes that way. That's not reflected in our voting because of the deficiencies in the voting system. So I feel like I'm very hopeful that if we can get the right people into office, that we could see a serious, dramatic change in the country. And it won't mean that everything is fixed and easy, that's for sure. But I think that there's a mood in the country that will allow us to make some real serious changes in the structure of our society. So I remain more hopeful, I think, or more optimistic in that sense than you do. But I'm approaching this election with extreme trepidation.
So Dick and I had a discussion, and Dick Myers, I agree with you up to an extent. I do have hope. Like you, I do have hope, and I do think that there is a way forward, but I don't think that we as a nation focus sufficient attention on what is driving the wedges between us and how those great divisions have weakened the people and weakened democracy. So Dick talks about Trump being a fascist. And, Sally brought up some things that are very true. He's a criminal. He's done some terrible things. Why don't we focus more on that? And I believe that at the root of why we don't focus more on that is that we take characters, the United States, we take characters like Trump and we hold them in high esteem, high regard. Those 70 million people admire him. They admire bombast. They admire people who don't really follow the rule of law as long as they're not Black. Now, if a Black person is not following the rule of law, I'm telling you right now, it's coming down on him. It's coming down on him hard. But there's something about these the pioneer and, just going and taking the land. And there's something, we hold that in high esteem. So this strongman image, I just went and looked up the definition of fascism, a system of government led by a dictator who suppresses opposition, promotes nationalism and racism. And it also involves the use of using security forces. Well, Dick and I were having sort of an argument this morning when he was talking about Spain's fascism, and I'm talking about the United States leaning in a fascist direction, but to a certain degree, we have always had fascism in Black and brown communities. When we talk about a system of government that suppresses opposition, that suppresses the right to vote, that uses security forces, whether it be paramilitary or police, that use violence on the community. That is the history of Black and brown America. So we have allowed fascism to exist in the United States. And in my mind, fascism is like a cancer. You can't find a cancer just in one part of the body and not think it's not going to metastasize and spread across. And that's what we're seeing now. January 6th, the people that were storming the Capitol, they didn't care if those police, the Capitol Police were Black, white, brown, didn't matter to them. Didn't matter to them if Nancy Pelosi was white. If she was there, she was probably going to get hurt. Because that's how fascism works. If you allow it to have a foothold, and then if you elevate in status people like Donald Trump, then what you're saying to the nation is, this is admirable behavior. He says, this is joy, this is good. I'm going to just go ahead and release these people if I'm elected. Well, we are allowing that to spread like a cancer. Yes, Sally.
As I see it, the problem is that I've read that the average reading level in this country is fourth grade. This is terrifying. Okay. And this is why these people who do not think beyond their own little minds or their cell phone or their computer or whatever are easily led. They are easily programmed. And when you look at a screen for 3 minutes, you drop into an alpha state. You therefore are easy to program. You believe what you're hearing much more readily. And so our media facilitates this kind of programming, indoctrination. It's a very scary situation. In a way, all our technical expertise is we're doing ourselves in. And we may be doing democracy in, and that's what's so terrifying. And then the question I have is, if Trump does win, will there ever be another election, which he has assured people there wouldn't be?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that we may be doing democracy in, but as I said, I do have hope, because if Kamala wins, that's not going to be the panacea that fixes everything, but it will give us time to work on the issues that really need to be worked on. We as citizenry, we can't just rest on our laurels and think that, okay, now Kamala's there, and so now we can go back to business as usual. We cannot go back to business as usual. We've got to increase the amount of people that are civically engaged and that do more than just sit around and are entertained.
The immediate benefit of having Kamala elected, though, is that we avoid having Trump elected.
Yes.
Because the minute he gets in, things will change dramatically. And so the minute she gets in, we have avoided that. And whatever she does, if she sits there and does nothing, we will have avoided having Trump in power.
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't have said more truth, Dick, but we have to continue to do this work, because if she's in, and she's in for 4 years, and those 70 million people, they're still there.
So I would like to talk about those 70 million people. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sally. And then Will.
Will has his hand up.
Let's let Will, Sally, you're muted. Let's let Will.
You're both muted. So unmute Will and talk, and then we'll go to Sally.
Let's let Will, and then we'll go to Sally. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about this discussion because it's occurring inside a bubble.
Yeah.
And this is always a problem. You see the other side as demons, and our side as angels and all that, regardless of what you do. One of the statistical things that's fascinating is the tendency to biased thinking is at least as great among progressives as it is among conservatives. The education level among conservatives may be lower than among progressives, although it used to be the other way around. The Republican Party was the more educated party, and people like the Supreme Court justices that Trump nominated, regardless of what you might think about their biases, are highly qualified technically for lawyers. They know much, much more than I do about the law, certainly. They have graduated high in the class from high quality law schools and are presumably highly intelligent people. So we're not talking about the good guys against the bad guys. We're talking about people with radically different or somewhat different points of view. Trump, for example, has been a politician of opportunity. He was a Democrat, he's a Republican, he believes the fundamentalist Christians while not practicing anything from fundamentalist Christianity, and so on. I think it's very easy to describe. He's a New York real estate operator, and all of the characteristics go with him. We still are faced with a nation which half of it believes he should be president, and many of those have reasons he should be president. Some of them are opportunists, but some of them are there because they believe that a strong person, which he projects as strength, would do it. So I think that he will be the president. And I think the consequences will not be as dire as we're talking about. They will, however, be a qualitatively different point of view than Kamala and her buddies would. But I think it is within the tradition of America, when you look back in history, that there have been people who were clearly dolts. My fellow North Carolinian Andrew Johnson comes to mind, for example. There are people who I think were brilliant conservatives to some extent. I think that is something that can happen. We can't assume that we have the answers and they don't, or that we are good and they are not, but recognize the mix of people in the country. And when one side wins and another doesn't, I don't believe democracy as we see it will fail even if Trump is elected. That we will be a nation which will go in a more conservative way, and it'll be some of the opinions which were prevalent in the 50s and 40s will be in sway, but we will not collapse as a nation. So let's be aware there are many perspectives that I don't understand that we need to listen to see what really will happen when it happens. We have November 6th, 7th, 8th, whenever the election is decided. We'll find out what we're facing for the next 4 years. But let's not get too carried away with knowing the answer.
Well, I have to
Thank
say
you.
that I disagree with you, Will, because I think that if he gets in, the circumstances, the conditions in the country will be worse than what we imagine. Because for one thing, the entire international order that we live within is held together by American promises, and no American promise is worth anything. So the entire international order that we're familiar with and comfortable with is going to collapse, and that's going to have a lot of impact. We don't know how it will turn out, but it will not exist the way it is today, and that's not a part of any discussion that I'm hearing in the public sphere.
Well,
So,
Dick, I think let's see what he does. Let's not talk about his rhetoric, where he's appealing to a particular group of people. But
yeah.
what actually happened under Trump is not that different from what actually happened under Biden when you get down to it. Many of Trump's tariffs are under Biden. Trump's attacks on NATO are sort of shot across the bow to get them in line, but I don't think he wants to get rid of NATO, et cetera, et cetera. That in practice, what happens in Washington doesn't change as radically as you might think from administration to administration, even under Trump. But let's see what happens.
That's
I
because
hope I'm wrong.
we have civil service protections, which he's going to discard.
Okay, so
I'm
Sally's
not sure. I'm not sure.
Sally's eager to chime in.
Yeah.
This is so much I'm thinking of. If Trump pulls us out of NATO, then Putin can walk all over Europe, number one. Number two, I hope that if Trump is elected, that somehow or other, we have a majority in the House and Senate, and he can't get anything done. But the fact that his politicized Supreme Court has given him infinite powers now, my only hope is that if Kamala is elected, she now will have the same powers that they planned for Trump.
So you know, I along with what we're saying, I try to understand what's going on in the head of those 70 million people, many of them who've joined, in my mind, a Trump cult. Because I live here in the People's Republic of Mount Washington, I kind of don't associate with a lot of hat-wearing Trumpskis. I just don't. I don't go out. I'm kind of old, and I don't go out and try to run into them. But I've lived a long, various life, and what I think has happened to our country is especially in the small towns in the South and the Midwest. Our industrial giants decided they could make more money if they made their widgets in China. So they took all the jobs out of all the factories out of the little towns that supported those towns and gave people a way to buy a house and send their kids to college and go to Florida on vacation. And they took those jobs, send them to China, and replaced them in those small towns with service jobs that paid a quarter as much. And then the Democratic Party in its wisdom, decided it would be better and more fun to appeal to educated, middle-class technocrats and leave the working class behind. And so the working class sits there, and now along comes a Pied Piper that promises them power, promises them retribution, and naturally they swim around it. I sort of, we've sort of think that it'll be dire under Trump. I don't know. I think we know that during his first administration, he had some generals and some rock-ribbed Republicans that kind of kept him somewhat within bounds. I just have the feeling that we won't have now. Will democracy end? I don't know. What democracy do we actually have when what's her name from Las Vegas gives $250 million to a campaign, and Trump gives $75 million a year to another campaign. And on the Democrats, they appeal to people with huge amounts of money. And you got to pay the piper. If these wealthy people are giving that much money to political parties, they're going to get a benefit. Well, what is the 12 people here? I mean, I assume maybe only Dick Myers gives $1 million to a candidate. The rest of us, yes, we go vote. Yes, we join a Dem club. Yes, we leaflet, but we don't. Is that a democracy? I don't know.
I think some of those are the legitimate questions that I think that the country is in a mood to make substantial change to, because we have seen the flaws in the system. So that's where I put my hope.
I do too. The founding fathers, they established this country based on the rule of landowning white men. And landowning white men were the only people who had a say. And God help me for not understanding why we think that's democracy, but apparently some people did think that was democracy. I don't think that we've ever arrived at democracy. I think we will arrive at democracy and have hopes of arriving at democracy when we finally get to a place where we work toward the issues that divide us. Now, some people are impacted negatively more than others, and that's why some people yell more than others. But I maintain that ultimately, until we address this, we will all hurt.
The thing that worries me, like fascist up and down the line, Trump and his folks are vilifying certain categories of people. The Haitians that they're accusing of eating our
They're
cats.
eating the dogs.
They're eating the cats.
They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Well, I mean, that's so, and then obviously he said, he calls people from certain countries shithole countries. He's promised to deport millions of undocumented or documented, mostly Latinos. If the guy at the top is saying those things, well, there's nutcases with guns in the woods that'll do something about it. And I'm fearful about that. And the victims will be our Black brothers and sisters, our brown brothers and sisters, our Arab American brothers and sisters, our gay brothers and sisters. I'm feeling pretty safe because I'm none of those things, but I do have a Black wife.
Well, you step away from me, nobody knows that.
Yeah.
So that's our happy message. How are you guys feeling?
One of the things that I've noticed, and maybe it's my own aging that is the cause of this. Look at
You're breaking up.
oh, how's this? Is this any better?
Yes.
But we look at all the things that Trump has done over the years, and hundreds of them. But it's when we look at the news is in business to make money, right? They're corporations. And so they're looking at what's the latest news we can put on. And so as a result of that, the news is just, it's like a blur. And it's the same with Trump. I mean, all of the things he's done that we know are abhorrent, it's almost like we forget because of the nature of the news cycle. So I don't know if that's my own memory issues or not, but I just see the news as, because it's
Complicit.
Huh?
Lori said complicit.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was on there. Sorry. Yes, they are
Yes.
responsible.
Yeah, I don't even see it as complicit. They're complicit, but it's not intentional. I see it more as what's the latest? We have to stay ahead of the news cycle. We have to stay ahead of our competition. And so it's just like a race to the bottom,
Right. Well, that's what happened when we changed the rules. And so now, the entire media sphere domain is owned pretty much by 6 corporations. And their number one goal is appealing to the profit margin. That's their concern, is
Right.
making as much money as possible. So we no longer can get the kind of information that we need and be well-informed citizens unless we dig. And Dick and I, we publish the LA Progressive every day, and we're digging every day. But we don't expect that average people could do that. First of all, we can do it because we don't work regular jobs. This is all we do. Dick gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I come downstairs at around 8. And for the entire day, we are publishing, we're editing, we're writing, we're recording, we have a podcast, we have a YouTube channel. And we reach maybe, with all that work, it's just 2 of us, maybe we reach 300,000 people.
That's great.
But it's a lot of work, but even 300,000 people, that doesn't move the needle. When you look at what the New York Times can do and what the Washington Post, profit-driven organizations, they could do a lot better, but they got to get that clickbait.
So another point that's kind of relates to what a couple of people said is Sharon's old companions at Jet Propulsion Lab make all these wonderful things. I mean, Dick Myers is taping this thing on something called AI Companion. I don't know what it's going to do. And somebody else mentioned how if you look at your phone screen for any length of time at all, it's hypnotic. And I think a part of what's going on with this is we're not able to keep up with our technology. And so we're inundated with the news. We're inundated with some news that we can't parse it out and make sense of it because 3 more stories just came. And there's more things on our phone. I loved a recent picture I saw, and it was fairly recent too. It showed a family of 3 or 4 kids and a father sitting on a New York subway car reading books. Remember those things? They had a cover and paper and so if you read a book, you kind of absorb it. If you watch the news for an hour, your head is spinning.
Yeah.
And Lori, I think that they are, the media benefits from constant war because so many of the investors are war profiteers. Yes. Dick Myers had his hand, and Sally, yes.
Question, I just wanted to comment. I get a fact checker newsletter from the Washington Post online. I find it very helpful.
Yes,
You
good.
find out what lies both candidates told in their presentations.
It's good.
I've seen that. Did Dick have his hand up?
Dick Myers.
I think, you talk about money in politics, which is a very serious problem, but I think that that's one of the problems that has been illustrated so clearly that we might hope for some kind of change to begin taking place if we got the right people into power. But I want to go back to something else, picking up on Sharon's comment. Democracy is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's the key principle of democracy. And what the Declaration of Independence did was it established that the people who were the citizens, who were landowning white people, basically, they
Yes.
had the right to say something about their government. And what has happened since then is we've expanded the definition of what the people are, and we've expanded the definition of what the rights are. And that's the progress that we have made. And it's incomplete. There's no question about that. But the core principle is of the people, by the people, for the people, and money is taking it away from us. And that's one of the serious problems that I think that is pretty visible today. A lot of people talk about it, and I have hopes that the right administration could begin making some changes to that.
That's right. So, you know, when those edicts were established, we didn't treat corporations like they were people,
Exactly.
but now we do.
Yes.
And so as long as we do that, corporations will always be the most powerful person, you know, and we're even the Supreme Court is already saying, you know, that that money talks. And
Yes.
so a lot of money talks very loudly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know, there's another factor that no one's mentioned, and that is the huge population of people over 65 in this country, way more than anybody ever expected to have to get through old age and through the healthcare system. And I live in, I'll be 92 in November, and I live in a facility where many of the people are demented. And many, many people do not have computer access or an iPhone. And so they are strictly dependent upon what they see on television. They don't have the options that you and I have because we're computer savvy. And so they're easily led by what they see on television. They don't see the other options.
So Sally, what is your secret?
Well, my mother lived to be 100, so I guess I got some good genes.
Good genes. You
I
wear
mean,
'em
no,
well.
not only do you not show it physically in your face, can't see that you're 92, but in your mind. And you're staying so current.
Well, I stay active.
Yeah, that is pretty good. I'd like to tell a quick story about a friend of mine who is in a place for people with dementia or memory problems. It was Oregon closed off the registration deadline on the 15th, and I was there visiting on the 14th, and I said, Frank, what about voting? He says, well, I don't know. I'm not registered, and I don't know. So I said, let me see what I can do. I called the registrar's office to get I wouldn't be able to get him registered before then for an extension. And they said, well, no, there is no extension. But we have people throughout the city who are visiting rest homes or shut-ins all over to make sure they get registered to vote. We'd be glad to send a crew to visit my friend Frank in his home. So they did. They got to the place. First of all, this is way right before the deadline. I got through immediately, which was amazing. The second part, she sent a crew out there, which arrived, only to be told that he has a guardian, and the guardian had to approve them to see him to register. Well, they were wrong, actually. But what happened was the people had to go on to the other appointments. They came back. The guardian phoned and said, no, he has a right to be registered. The guardian has no say. Let him be registered. But when they got back, he'd gone to sleep. So he didn't get registered. But those people were not only disappointed, they were angry that they were not allowed to help him. That here in a major city in the country, there are people in the registrar's office taking their jobs with passion to make sure that everybody gets to vote. The very next day, the 16th, my friend didn't get registered. He took a registration form with him, got him registered on the 16th. So for the next elections, he will be there. And a series of people cared enough about people's right to vote to work out not only the technical details to work on it, but they showed a passionate desire to do that. And I came away saying, I'm finding people like that working in the registrar's office in the country. This is something we can be proud of, with all the other stuff in the place. That's
This
people
is,
I'm-
you know, that's a beautiful story, Will. And it's the reason that I have hope. Because I do think that most people want a working democracy. But the divisions that exist between us stop us from being able to see areas where really bad things are going on. Well, like what happened? You took some action because you found out that your friend wasn't registered. Had you not been there, you wouldn't have known.
more
We have
important.
so many holes in the system.
There's another thing on that. The divisions are a serious issue, and I want to be very clear. I was arguing for, let's not get too hung up in our own opinions. But I do believe the opinions are important, the divisions are real, and we have things to do. But another thing is there are many groups of people working on bridging the gap. There are, as a group, they're nationwide. I'm a member of the chapter in Portland called Braver Angels.
I know that group.
You know the group, yeah.
Yes.
And I first heard it and I thought, oh, come on, this is kumbaya time.
Oh,
What's
it's
this
good.
nonsense?
It's good.
Yeah, but it's not, though. They are very practical.
Yep.
They bring people together, red and blue, to discuss among themselves, to get across so that even though your opinions may not change, you have a recognition of people on the other side of the divide and can work together. And for me, the hope for America, or any nation really, is the ability to take the time and energy and the courage it takes to cross the divide. I know you, Dick, and Sharon have dealt with that on race, for example. It takes courage for a black person to engage honestly with a white person, and honestly, vice versa. You're scared of making a mistake, you're scared of, oh, I did it wrong, kind of a thing, and your fears take over, blocking you from taking the action necessary to recognize there is a path across the divide, and it's worth taking. And
That's
that,
right.
for me, is one of the key things.
That's right. That's right. I believe, you know, when I saw Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris standing there together, it really brought tears because they may not agree on the strategies that need to be taken to achieve the things that we all want. We all want to have healthcare for people. We all want our people educated. You know, we all want to eradicate this country of homelessness. I can't believe that there's a large group of people in this country that love the fact that we have such a large homeless population. Nobody wants that. But where we differ is in the strategies to how to resolve that. And I believe that people that have difference of opinion about strategy should be able to sit down and talk to each other. And that's what made me so happy about Liz Cheney. Also, it also made me happy that she just said enough is enough. It really does make me sad that there are so many people that will go along with what Donald Trump is saying and doing and holding him up like he's some kind of hero.
What I love is that so many Republicans are coming over to vote for Kamala, and that Adam Kinzinger said at the convention, you know, to vote for Kamala does not make you a Democrat. It makes you a patriot. And that's what's missing in this country is real patriotism. It's so sad. And another thing that bothers me is that nobody really addresses the fact that Donald Trump is a man of very bad character. He's, you know, he's rotten to the core, and how people cannot see this, I do not know.
But he has some nice dance steps.
No, they like it. I think they admire that. There's a section of that
That's
70
scary.
million that is what's scary.
Yeah.
They think that is the way that a leader should behave.
I know.
And even his admiration of dictators. And
It's
Putin.
It's
It's
I
terrifying.
think a part of what's going on is there is a great layer of discontent in this country. Some of it justified, and supporting Trump is a way to give the country the finger.
Yeah, there may be some of it.
Exactly. Because people feel left behind, and then they blame people of color for taking their jobs. Well, that's not the case.
Right, right. And I think they feel left behind.
Have made this country. I mean, we were immigrants to begin with. That's how it started.
That's right.
But
This
they
was a
also
neighboring
blame
country
the
before.
intellectual snobbery of the Democrats, the elite, the educated folk who look down on those people who have a fourth grade education or stuff, or people who don't quite wear the right clothes. They wear these funny hats and so on and so forth. There's a lot of contempt for ordinary folk among the elite,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yes, I think you're right. I think you're right. But what's odd to me is that Donald Trump himself holds that contempt
Oh,
for those people. So
That's it.
why do they like him?
well, he's the Wizard of Oz.
He is.
But
But
that,
a part of, Sharon says everybody wants the best for this country, but I think there's an element that wants to disembowel our education system. They don't, I mean, they've raised tuition now for college is skyrocketing. And when I was helping my daughter go to enroll in college, we talked to her friends who were decent B and A- students. They weren't even thinking about college because they knew they couldn't afford it. The one fellow who's now a lawyer, but at the time he thought, well, maybe he could be the manager of a Walmart if he worked really hard. And that was his view. And we know that there is an element that is hurting our education system, and we're paying the price for it because there's an element that doesn't care about that. As long as they're doing well, and maybe some Democrats are like this too, then who cares about the people in East Lebanon, Kentucky?
And that's not real well thought out because it always spreads. Even if what we're talking about is, we end up going to war.
Yeah.
And maybe your son might be in that war. So
Well, all I know is my second husband had a GED from high school, and his dad had to take him out of from high school to help on the farm in Kansas, and he knew more than most of the PhDs I have ever known.
yeah.
Because he was self-educated, he was motivated, he was a highly successful human being. And that's what we're not seeing amongst many people in this country, is how to be a successful human being, caring about your brothers and sisters and what happens to your country. It's all me. What could they do for me?
Yeah.
You know. And by the way, if you want to know how to stay sharp, take zinc. Take zinc every day.
I take zinc every day. I take zinc every day. Thank you, Sally. That's good.
I think that's a good idea.
It doesn't take stem cell injections either.
Well, there's another attitude thing that I think is important in these times, especially, regardless of who wins, that the presidency. First of all, local politics is still within reach, at least in Portland, and I think in Pasadena too. Maybe not in LA, but Pasadena is a size that you can get to know the mayor. But also focusing on what you want to have happen rather than what you don't want to have happen. It doesn't mean being optimistic or whatever, Pollyanna. It just says, look, how am I going to direct my energy towards something I want? That's me. But it also defines me in a broader sense, because I'll go over to my fellow who is politically different from me or otherwise different and say, what do you want? And I want this. So I say, I want this, and you want that. Well, suppose we both want something together. And you say, yeah, we can do that. I don't like this thing you're doing over here, but let's get this fence over here built and not worry about getting the creek drained right now. Okay, we'll work on the fence. And we come away from acting together in what we want. First of all, satisfying something we want, and second, diffusing the division that keeps us from working on the crick later on. And that, I think, is something we can do as an individual to keep from being crazy, basically, or being so depressed that you go in a hole and hide.
Well, I think that's a good way to end this conversation. It's after 1 o'clock.
We're good till 1:30.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got another 25 minutes to go if you want to go.
Well, what Will was just talking about, local politics. I did kind of want to talk briefly about local politics. I shared on my screen, I was telling that my son is running for office. And with him running for office, I wrote a couple of articles about at-large elections versus district elections, something I had never really thought very much about, but it's a very local issue, and it results in either more democracy or less democracy. So it turns out, let me explain to you at-large elections and the difference between at-large and district by district. There are 88 incorporated cities in Los Angeles County. And only 33 of those 88 have district by district elections. And what that means is the city is broken up into a district. Pasadena has districts, city council districts. Los Angeles has city council districts. But the vast majority of LA County cities do not have that. What they have is at-large elections. So when they go to the polls to vote for their city council, the entire city will select from no more than 3. Like if you go and look at their ballot, it'll say select your favorite 3 or your top 3, no more than 3. Whereas in district by district, District 2 people are only voting for the District 2 political candidate. So it turns out that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Supreme Court Justice, wrote about this. And she wrote about this in a decision, I think it was the Shelby v. Holder decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act of the United States. And what she talked about in at-large versus district by district is that at-large elections dilute the voting power of the people. Because if you have 5 people that live somewhat wealthy, live right in the same neighborhood, but the whole city votes for them, that means there are pockets of the city who have no contact with these 5 people. Whereas if you break it up in districts, each district has a representative living in their district, and they have contact with that representative living in their district. That representative living in their district will more than likely at least share a geographical region, perhaps share a culture, perhaps even share other things. So California adopted the California Voting Rights Act and says that all the cities have to have district by district races. Great. Well, they adopted this 20 years ago. Why is it that only 33 cities have done it? Because it is not self-enforcing. And in order for the cities to change, they have to be forced to be changed. They have to be sued. It's amazing. I did this piece, so I just couldn't believe. So, I see why they keep electing the same people. Because in order for them to enforce a district by district race, the city has to be threatened to be sued or be sued. So just giving you guys a heads up about how the corruption begins. It begins at the lowest levels. And we, the people, can do something about it. But I guarantee you were not going to see my piece in the LA Times.
No. Well, I think I mentioned in passing, but Nick and Sharon, you should know that I live not in Pasadena. I live in Portland, Oregon. I used to live in Pasadena for many years, Altadena overlooking the JPL and so on. But in Portland, if you may know, we are just changing from at-large voting to district by district.
Oh, so you know about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. We not only are doing that, We are electing 3 representatives per district. So you will
Nice.
have 4 districts and 12 councilors. We are reforming the entire structure, which was this unique system of councilors with silos and stuff, with a city manager, a weak mayor, and the council being strictly a legislative body. And just to make things interesting, we're going to ranked choice voting,
Oh, wonderful.
which is a
That is
whole different world.
fabulous. Oh,
And we're at 6s and 7s as to how it's all going to work out. But we'll let you know in a few minutes when
oh,
it
that's
happens.
exciting. That's very exciting because you know what that does is it entices people to get engaged. One of the reasons I believe that people are so apathetic is there's so many barriers to entry. You know, that you walk in, like I show you the picture of the city hall in my son's community. A person like me, you walk into that and you look at that wall, it says, Sharon, don't even think about trying to get involved in this. You are not welcome. And that's exactly what we don't need in a real democracy. Dick.
I just want to say that I like this concept of the district voting, and it's correct that that makes a big difference. But remember that districts can also be gerrymandered. So
Yes,
it's
yes.
not really the solution unless you take an additional step to ensure that you have some sharing. And there's a recent, I think a fairly recent study, I don't know where it was, that was cited in another discussion group that I was in about studying different kinds of democracy. And they were talking about things like this question and concluded that proportionality in democracy was more effective in terms of engaging people and serving the people's interests. And so this goes right in. So there are studies underway, that document and reinforce that point of view. But I also want to go back to something that you, Dick, and Sharon said at the very beginning, is that this whole racial structure of the world is embedded very deeply within our psyches and within our brains, and that's the premise of not only of your LA Progressive. That's basically the premise of the 1619 Project and the basis of the Caste book by Isabel Wilkerson, that these things are very deeply embedded in us. And I know that while reading the book Caste, after reading one chapter, I just sat there kind of stunned, thinking, oh my God, I have to rethink everything that's in my head because everything is in there so deeply. And I think that part of our problem is that white people are not at all sensitized to racism. They don't understand it because it's not in their face. And so my feeling is that what we're doing here with something like this program, the 1619, the little bit of thing that we're doing is, to some extent, we're increasing people's sensitivity to what racism is all about. And I have an example. We have a group, Village Movement California, which is a regional association of villages, and we were just down in San Diego at a conference. And one of the presenters in the conference, they were talking about, this was a Black woman talking about her experience. And she was talking about being part of a group where they were putting on some educational programs. And if she was in a position to set up an educational program, and she was working with a supervisor. She wasn't in charge of the thing, but she was in charge of doing this. And she was working with someone below someone who she thought of as a friend and an ally. This is a Black woman. And she was starting to plan this program. And the supervisor said to her, well, we have to be careful that we get a speaker who's going to appeal to a broad swath of the public. And this woman immediately changed her attitude about the person she was working for, because she saw that as a racial comment, racially based comment. And I thought that was true. And there was another person from our group, another Black woman who was attending as part of our contingent. And she recognized that and said the same thing. We were discussing this later at dinner, and 2 of the white people there who were board members, and we're an organization that believes in diversity and inclusivity. That's part of our value system, and so that's their declared values, and I think they're there. And they did not see it that way. And there's the difference right there. Okay, and just in that little discussion of 3 or 4 people listening to somebody and having different interpretations, and that sounds to me like exactly the kind of thing that you described that you two go through.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's deeply, deeply embedded, and these are people in the choir. You know, these are not MAGA people who didn't see it that way.
Right.
These are people who are on the same side, thinking the same way we are, but they didn't. These 2 people who didn't see it, they didn't see it that way. And I think that's what we're working on, is trying to illustrate that thing and provide a little bit of education to a very small group of people, and hoping that it spreads.
Many years ago, Dick and I used to regularly attend neighborhood Unitarian Universalist church, and there was a book study there. And the book we were studying at that time was a book written by a Unitarian whose name is Thandeka, Thandeka, I believe. She just goes by a single name. And the theme of the book was to try to understand whiteness. And she offered an exercise. In this book, what she maintains is that white people have been culturalized or socialized to avoid addressing race. It is almost impolite and improper to even say white, to say the word white, to talk about your white friend. You can talk about you have a Black friend or you have a Latina friend, but you would never say I have a white friend named John. And in this book, she says, I want to offer you an exercise. Try to get yourself to call your friends by their race, all the races. And what it will do, it will highlight how you have transferred the meaning of white to just mean people. And when you talk about people who are not white, you separate them from peoplehood. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. I was sitting down having a conversation with one of those neighborhood Unitarian people, and she was telling me about Pasadena and how it used to be segregated. This is a woman that was in her early 90s. And she says, well, people didn't know any better. And I just looked at her because clearly she meant white people didn't know any better. But she doesn't know that that's what she's saying. And the purpose of the exercise in the book is to help to bring that to your consciousness, because then you begin to see the divisions that you are now, many white people are now very unconscious about.
I think that's true. I came across a little something, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago, talking about American Indian tribes, the indigenous people. And the thing that I picked up on there, it seemed that their own names for themselves, for however they referred to themselves, also translated to mean the people.
People. Mm-hmm.
Right. So so each group saw itself as the people and other tribes as other things.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
It's that being civilized. You know, there is that sense we start with our little, as a baby, when you come out and here's this entity that gives you milk and stuff, and that's me and now mama. And then there's this other person that wanders around, that's daddy, and you all look like each other. And then you get, slowly but surely, you build out a recognition that there is more than just yourself and mommy and daddy, and you get socialized. But there is that point where the people becomes people that mostly look like you. Visible differences are very hard to deal with because it's obvious. I mean, Sharon looks black, Dick looks white, and you can do whatever you would say. If Sharon was a Unitarian and Dick was a Baptist, that wouldn't be visible, and so on. But I've been using a broader term than white supremacy or whiteness. I talk about European supremacy and European dominance, Euro dominance, because European religion and Christianity with a certain role for Jews, but not Muslims, European styles of government, European styles of dress, European dominance politically and economically in the world in the age of empire. If I say I'm a European, then I'm obviously the people. But then I have to recognize that I'm Euro-American, Afro-American, so on and so forth. I like the hyphen, even though it's not fashionable, but then I'm old, I don't have to be fashionable. That this is something, I am a hyphenated person, but the more dominant part of the hyphen is American. I'm different, but I'm linked to unity. And that for me is an attitude shift, or a saying it out loud sort of a shift that helps to deal with that. Because, yeah, that self-centeredness is built in. But you can define self a little differently.
Yes.
All
I
right, go ahead.
I think we'll get there. I'll just close by saying I took my kids to Europe. Will said something that sparked this memory. And as this was their first trip abroad. And they were both teenagers. And as we were about to land, you know, when you're in the plane and you land in a different country, they give you a little form to fill out, and it, you know, ask your name and your nationality and the purpose of your visit, something like that. And my daughter, who I think was like 13 or 12, she says, what's my nationality? And it, you know, in a way, it kind of broke my heart. It broke my heart because they just don't feel American. I said, you're American. But there's so many messages that say you're not.
There's something else too that I think, you know, there's a whole question about what is whiteness. And whiteness appears to be really a uniquely American concept. Now, racism is everywhere, you know, so we have racism around the world, but the concept of whiteness seems to be an American invention. And there's a book about some years ago, how the Irish became white. And if you look genetically, the Irish are from Northern Europe, and they are as white as anybody can get. But they were not viewed as white when they came in here in large numbers as poor people coming in and concentrating in the Northeast. They were certainly discriminated against, and this book is about how they got out of that discrimination and became white. And then you know, the Eastern Europeans who come in, Mediterranean people, they weren't accepted immediately as white either. They have become white over time.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have become fit into the whiteness, but the whiteness seems to be a particularly American product, and that seems to be consistent with the origin of the country as a slave-owning country, and seems to be tied into the 1619. So you know, I'm not proving anything here, but these are some concurrences and things that seem to flow together in a way, in my head, at least.
For me too. I mean, as a Jew, I've been white. Obviously, I have white privilege. I mean, you look at me, I have white privilege, no question. But there have been so many times in history that I've not been. And frankly, you know, I mean, I've been, you know, I've been hesitant actually to talk about it here. But it's at times been confusing. And there's also like, who am I? And, you know, there's also a book about when Jews became white as well. But so.
I read something that said that was really in the mid-60s that Jews became white in this country. And my wife was Jewish, by the way.
So I don't know. I'm just throwing out that little piece too.
Yes.
I don't know what to say about it, but
Yes.
I've
Well,
never like in the times that I've been here, I've thought about it a lot, and I've never felt quite okay or quite safe enough, in all
Yeah.
honesty, to
It's
bring it up.
it's an
So,
anomalous
I'm glad you
position.
feel better.
Yeah.
hmm?
I'm glad that you're feeling better. Maybe something is working.
Yeah.
Well, there's a concern. There's a friend of mine here in Portland who's Jewish, who is very worried about the rise in anti-Semitism recently,
Yes.
because it's the greatest hate-based group, except for race, black and white, and it's very insidious because, first of all, I'm in a part of town which is a lot of Jewish people, and just by the by the segregated rules of the day when it was put. But a true story, in World War II, a lot of the Jewish scholars fled to the United States, and there were quotas in the northern universities, so there only so many Jewish professors could be, and so Jews looked to my hometown of Durham, among others, which had Duke University and other education, where they could get a job. Some of them got jobs in the Jim Crow colleges at the time, historically black colleges, Durham, North
Einstein.
Carolina Central, yeah. And here they came. First of all, these are European scholars who had never taught people who were black, and the black people who had never seen somebody who looked white and was Jewish. And they went back and forth. They said, well, we know that Jews are discriminated against. They're not quite like white people. So they had this whole cultural getting to know each other went along. There's I think, National Geographic documentary called From the Swastika to Jim Crow, telling the story of the people coming to that area. It's fascinating ambiguity you're talking about as being a Jewish white person.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the fears that I had in bringing it up here was somehow overshadowing that, I'm not brown. And I lived in Monterey Park, California, from the time I was 6 to 16. I lived in a restricted tract. And the only reason that my family got, I mean, it was unknown to my family, but it was, we had an anglicized name. I mean, Coleman used to be Kolmanovich, and it used to be Grissard from Romania before that. But I had an anglicized name, and I'm very white. I mean, look how pink my hands are. I mean, I pass. I choose not to, but the difference between Sharon and me is I pass.
Yeah.
And you can't.
Yeah.
And but it's still been like utterly confusing. And for someone who is not a silent person, I have found myself in spaces where I felt silent, and here was one of them. So,
Well, we
what
are
a-
getting close to the end. So Sharon and Dick, you have any closing comments you'd like to make to wrap us up?
Well, I want to thank Toby for bringing this to the fore because it's important that you not be silenced. And I
I know.
understand it's right. You absolutely have something to share. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for making it safe.
Mhm.
So
Well,
I will
thank-
say I'm working on resuming my glass half fullness with this coming election, and I'm going to remain hopeful until that day, and we'll see where the chips fall.
Tell
Yeah.
me who you are. You don't look like Karen. I think your name
Okay.
shows up as Karen.
Karen DeMott.
Karen DeMott.
That's my wife,
Uh,
Fred Lowe.
And what's your name?
I'm Fred Lowe.
Oh, Fred
Oh,
Love.
Fred Lowe. Okay. Hello, Fred. I just
Hello.
saw you just the other day.
Yes, you did.
Okay. I can't see, so I can't recognize you at all. So, all right. Well, thank you for coming, everyone. Next month, we have Lynn Hudson coming, who has written a book called West of Jim Crow. And what she's talking about is the experience of what racism is like in California. And a lot of Jim Crow has come to California. This book is about 4 years old, and I haven't read it yet, but she's a historian who's based now in the Midwest. but grew up here in Pasadena. And as I understand it, she has a chapter in her book about Pasadena specifically. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion next month as well. And that'll be again on the third Friday of the month. And this conversation will be up on the website as soon as we can get it there, probably midweek sometime next week.
Right.
And we'll have an article up which Sharon and I will work together. Sharon basically writes it, and we'll have that up as soon as we have the video available so that we can post them together. So look for the blog, see where we are, stay in touch, and we hope to see you again in November and December. And let's hope that we're in a better world in November.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
hope
thanks
so.
to Dick and Sharon for showing up today
Thank
and
you.
being
Thank
here.
you
Yes.
so much.
Yeah.
And thanks to Dick
And for
Myers
DLA
for-
Progressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.